welcome to We'll Talk. Today, the 11th day of the month of Mar Cheshvan, 5775. It is November 4th, 2014. This week, Shabbat, Parshat Vayera. You know, when we sit down at the microphone every week and we record Temple Talk, we have the disadvantage of pre-recording, and we try to do it just at the very last minute, right before its initial broadcast, because the world changes so quickly, and we have our way of relating to events through what we hope is our Torah perspective. But you know, in this particular case, the world has changed in a way I think that is markedly and distinctly irrevocable. Since our last broadcast. Our last broadcast a week ago, the Tuesday of Parshat Lech Lecha, we mentioned that the following day there is going to be a conference in Jerusalem marking the anniversary of the 849th year of the ascent of Maimonides to the Temple Mount. That's become a day that is celebrated by the Temple Mount activists, those that cherish the Temple Mount and go up to it and work towards the realization of Jewish rights, non-Muslim rights for prayer there. And little did we know that the whole world would change in 24 hours, because at that conference, at the conclusion of the conference, as you probably know, Yehuda Glick, past Director General of the Temple Institute some 6 years ago, he was shot at close range, 4 shots, and at this point, thank God, he is doing remarkably well. We all need to pray for his recovery. Harav Yehuda Yoshua ben Ita Brindel, and God willing, together with all of Israel, we pray for his total recovery. So far, it's nothing short of miraculous. Thank God that he really is improving, and we hope that will continue. And this whole unspeakable event has thrown us into a chain of events and has been so incredibly transformative as far as the narrative of the Temple Mount. And here is Yehuda, who's a person who has been working very selflessly for our goal of achieving, of fixing the wrong of the fact that in a illegal way, in a undemocratic way, in a way that is basically a sham, Jews, Christians, all non-Muslims are not allowed to pray on the Temple Mount, even though that is who is it that isn't allowing them? I mean, the law of the State of Israel guarantees religious freedom. And the Supreme Court of the State of Israel, as we've reported to you for years now, has upheld numerous repeated rulings that the Jewish people and all people must be allowed freedom of access of worship and expression of religious belief at all holy sites. And so what happened here is incredible. It has vastly, vastly changed the terrain of the narrative of the Temple Mount here in Israel and all over the world, that such a thing, such a horrible crime could happen, that someone who has been advocating prayer, there's nothing more more pure and peaceful than a person's right to just open his mouth and pray quietly without bothering him, that such a person could be gunned down at close range. So, first of all, and again, thank God, we're very grateful and pleased to be able to let you know, as you've probably been following, that his condition is improving steadily. And we hope that will continue. And one of the things that came to light very, very soon afterwards was another so-called hit list, or list of another 14 temple activists that appeared on Muslim social media networking that targeted more temple activists and we found that, of course, very, what should I say? And I personally am included in that list, as well as our founder, Rabbi Yisrael Ariel, and some other very fine people. We're all in good company. And you know what? As someone spoke at a gathering that was held to pray for Yehuda and to sound off about what's going on, as someone mentioned, those bullets that struck Yehuda from close range were fired at every Jew that goes to the Temple Mount, and every Jew that's trying to change the situation, every Jew that wants to pray on the Temple Mount. And it's no surprise that there exists such a list, and there always has, except that now it's become very, very public knowledge, and it's been widely reported.
I would just extend that, Rabbi, to say every Jew, because the Temple Mount, what it stands for, is who we are. It is our identity as Jews in the world. And so to shoot someone for wanting to pray in a Temple Mount is to shoot at the identity, at the heart and soul of the Jewish nation as a whole.
And the attempt on Yehuda's life was nothing short of an actual hit, an actual assassination. It was, he was approached by a terrorist whose identity and whose status as being a terrorist has been confirmed. This isn't a news show, so we won't go over all those details that you can look up if you haven't heard them. But the guy asked him, "Are you Yehuda?" And he confirmed. And here's this list that I'm holding in my hand right here. It's a graphic. It's quite well done, actually. Listen, I'd like to give this program today a name, and the name I would like to give it is, I'd like to call it the tale of the status quo, and I'd really like to explore this word, this expression, the status quo, that appears in so many references. In the context of the situation on the Temple Mount. We need to talk about this. But first, a word from our sponsor, the Torah. This week, Parshat Vayera. And this week in Parshat Vayera, in the book of Breshit, we really get into the nitty-gritty of the character of Avraham Avinu, Abraham, our first patriarch, our forefather. And it's really amazing who he was, and it's just one of my favorite Torah portions. We begin with Abraham's being visited by the angels following his circumcision. And the depth of the first verses of Parshat Vayera are just bottomless, impenetrable. And I've spoken about this many years, the idea of the religious experience that Abraham was having, that even though he was literally talking to Hashem as the verse opens, he ran away from his conversation with Hashem in order to act like Hashem, because the Torah teaches that the main religious experience is not just contemplating your navel, is not just even having a real talk with God, but action. What are you doing in this world? What are you doing in this world to make it a better place? You can be in an ivory tower and you can be having a vision and you can be talking to God. It could be real. Well, that's fine and good, but if you're not doing something for someone else, it doesn't translate into very much. And that's what we learn from these first few verses, where Avraham, even though he was suffering on the third day after his operation at his advanced age of 99, he wanted to take care of these men. It goes on and on, the parsha, the promise of Yitzchak, and Avraham interceding on behalf of Sodom, these wicked cities, because Avraham is the archetypal citizen of the world and represents responsibility and represents letting everyone know that God is God. And we talked about that, why he appears exactly after the flood in the narrative, and how he represents the legacy of responsibility in God's world. The Parsha is just amazing. But what I want to emphasize to you in the word from our sponsor is that when it comes to the 10th trial of that sorely tried man, Avraham, the Akedah, the binding of Yitzchak beginning in chapter 22, and it happened after these things that God tested Avraham and said to him, Avraham, and he replied, "Here I am." And he said, "Please take your son, your only one, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah. Bring him up there as an offering upon one of the mountains which I shall tell you." I want to, God willing, in this week's video Torah lesson, I want to speak more in depth, some thoughts about the significance of Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac. I want to talk about that. But right now, I just want to share one thought. And that is that in this verse, God says to Abraham, take your son and go to the land of Moriah. Yitzchak, if I may, no pun intended, Yitzchak. It's a good question for you because your name is Yitzchak. Tell me something. Where is the land of Moriah?
This is the first and last time I believe it's ever mentioned.
Exactly. There's no other reference in the entire Torah to a place called Eretz HaMoriah. In fact, there's a statement that the sages make where they say, you know what, we've been over the whole thing, gone out over the whole Torah, looked at the whole land of Israel, gone through all the maps, and we don't find a place called Eretz HaMoriah. There is no place called the land of Moriah.
God must have been making it up.
But what is the whole thing here that's so beautiful and so profound is that it's just this is a validation, a stamp, a confirmation of every word that you and I, Yitzchak, have ever shared on this or any other broadcast from the beginning of time for 30 years. This is it. What this means, go and take him to Eretz HaMoriah. The whole land of Israel and subsequently the whole world is named for Har HaMoriah, for Mount Moriah, for the Temple Mount. It all becomes Moriah. There is no land of Moriah. It's all Eretz HaMoriah. Why is this? Why does he say go to Eretz HaMoriah? Because from that point, from that specific point, it spreads out from there. Not just the sanctity, but the call, the identity, the conviction. It's a nerve center, and it's all becomes Eretz HaMoriah. The whole land is named for that particular nekuda, that particular nerve center. It's just like picture just a concentric circles. Picture something just reverberating from a center point. It all takes on the characteristic of Eretz HaMoriah because it is everything. It is the center, and therefore, when the poet Ori Tzvi Greenberg said that whoever controls the Temple Mount controls the entire land. And when we say, look with your eyes and see what's going on and look what the struggle is all about, and nothing has confirmed that as much as this horrendous event which has changed the course of history and which has changed reality and which has changed all of our lives and which has brought Eretz HaMoriah, the concept that I'm speaking about, to the forefront of consciousness of the people of Israel. And we're going to speak more about that right now. It's just become so clear. This is the entire issue. So I want to talk about a tale of the status quo. So when you guys hear the word status quo, you'd be using it at work. You might be using it, you might walk into a room, you got your living room, you got your family sitting around, and everything is copacetic. I don't know. So you'll say this is the status quo. Everything is okay. Because it basically means things as they are in a certain pattern, and it's all like fixed. Mm-hmm. It's what it is right now. The expression status quo, as it's used in the news reports that you hear, referring to the situation on the Temple Mount, is to me a filthy expletive. A filthy expletive. You gotta stick your fingers in your ears if somebody in your room is saying status quo. Whoa, you gotta blanch. You gotta turn red, turn crimson if you hear the word status quo. Say, oh my, how could you use that? There's a child present. How could you say that? You know why? Because the word expression status quo is referring to an imbalance. It's referring to a criminal breach of Israel's code of law, and it means that Muslim prayer and identity is allowed on the Temple Mount, and every other form of expression of any sentiment whatsoever or belief is disallowed. That's what we mean when Netanyahu and Abdallah, his best friend, and anyone else talks about the status quo on the Temple Mount. Just bear that in mind. It means a situation that is illegal and that is monstrous and intolerable and undemocratic and actually an issue of discrimination. So here's the deal. We have been fighting, Yehuda has been fighting, all people involved with the Temple Mount movement have been fighting for all these years for Israel to officially abolish what's called the status quo on the Temple Mount, because it's been established legally that it shouldn't exist. It can't exist. It's not fair. Right? We always talk about how the police treat us on the Temple Mount. You see it in the videos that we post. You see that these horrible hordes of what I like to call the Valkyries, or the witches on the Temple Mount, the paid agitators who receive a monthly salary from Hamas, right, and men as well. They stand, they come up into your face. Just yesterday, they actually physically assaulted member of Knesset, Mu'alim. They physically assaulted this female member of Knesset. They shoved her. It's on video, right? The police just stand there. It's called camera wars. We take pictures of them. They take pictures of us. The police take pictures of everybody. Yesterday, I took the inimitable Helen Friedman's wonderful group educational organization called AFSI, Americans for a Safe Israel. It must have been their 35th trip to Israel. This is a group that was formed to advocate for the land of Israel. Took them up to the Temple Mount. And I said, don't worry. An hour from now, an hour after we go down, your pictures are going to be up on all sorts of incendiary Muslim websites, and the caption is going to read, "Settlers storm Al-Aqsa." We're always settlers, and we always storm. And indeed, they appeared, because these people come right up into our faces and take our pictures. And by the way, that's what happened to Yehuda. And the paper that I'm holding in my hand now, which is this beautiful color poster brochure that appeared on Muslim Facebook pages with my picture and Rav Ariel's picture and Moshe Feiglin's picture and Michael Ben-Ari and Arnon Segel and a number of other people. This whole warning that we're being warned. How do you think they have our pictures? Because they're always taking pictures. The police don't do anything. The police don't do anything at all about the situation on the Temple Mount because they are instructed not to. So case in point is that, for example, prior to the assassination attempt that was made on Yehuda, Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, made a very insightful with a C, inciting statement, and he said that the Jews should be prevented from visiting the Temple Mount by all means. By all means. And then today again, he issued a warning that he said that when Jews visit the Temple Mount, and I quote Abbas, man of peace, head of the PA, Palestinian Authority, he said, you have to understand that when Jews visit the Temple Mount, it is, and I quote, a violation of Muslim feelings. We're making them feel bad. You make them feel bad, you get shot in the chest 4 times, you know what I'm saying? We're making them feel bad by going there to pray. And I've been interviewed constantly this week, whether it was CNN yesterday and today and the Wall Street Journal, and trying to explain to these people. They all say, well, how do you think the Muslims feel when you go up there? And I say, first of all, what do you think that we're praying for? What do you think that we're praying for when we pray? What is Jewish prayer? We're praying for the betterment of mankind. We're praying for the unity of humanity. We're praying for, you know what we used to say in the 60s? Love, peace, dope. We're praying for mankind to come on, smile on your brother, everybody get together. That's what we're praying for. But let me ask you a question. What exactly do you think is incitement about my moving my lips? Why is that a reason to want to kill me? What does that say anything to you, Mr. CNN or Wall Street Journal? Do you see any red lights from that? Do you think that's normal? You mean I deserve to be on a hit list because we're talking about peaceful prayer? So today, Abbas says, this is a violation of Muslim feelings. Everybody seems to be very worried about their feelings. I was shocked beyond belief to read the United States State Department's briefing, wherein, for a very brief period of less than 24 hours, Israel actually closed the Temple Mount for the first time in 2000 to everybody, but immediately caved in. When I say Israel, by the way, in this context, I only mean one person, and that's the Prime Minister, caved into international pressure and reopened it to Muslims, but kept it closed that day, the next day for Jews. So the State Department, when they issued their condemnation, the condemnation was of Israel's closure of the Temple Mount to Muslims. And they said the status quo has to be put back in place. It has to be opened for Muslims. And a questioner in the State Department briefing said, but you mean, what about for Jewish prayer? And they said, no, this is our position that we maintain, that it has to be open for Muslims. Of course, Jen Psaki, is that how you pronounce it, said, that doesn't mean that we don't condemn the shooting of the American rabbi. But it should only be open for Muslims. And America's very worried about their feelings. And here today, there's a very leading story. You know that the same Jen Psaki, the State Department spokesman, she really blasted Israel for Israel's approving 500 houses in Jerusalem. Yes, Israel has approved the building of 500 houses for Jews in Jerusalem in an act of terrible gall and audacity that we should be building houses in Jerusalem. We're really endangering our relations with the United States. We're endangering our relations with the European Union because we seem to be torpedoing any chance for peace because we're actually building houses in Jerusalem. But I want you to know what the State Department says about our plan to build houses in Jerusalem. And I quote, she says, "It would be unfortunate if, after the unequivocal and unanimous opposition of the United States and international community, Israeli authorities would actively seek to push this plan forward. That would be," she says, "unfortunate." In other words, she's saying, we told you not to. We told you unequivocally and unanimously that we oppose your building houses for Jews in Jerusalem because Jerusalem isn't yours. And all of these things are very, very connected. America's position now towards Israel, there's no reason to wear a mask. It's so clear that America's allies are Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas. And America is going out of its way to make that very, very clear. So the story is that this is all about the land of Moriah and what that means to the Jewish people, what that means to the whole world. It's a tale of the status quo. And it's about hurting people's feelings, I guess. And it's about secret meetings with King Abdallah. And it's about acting responsibly and all sorts of things. We really need to understand what's going on the Temple Mount today because the outcome will affect you. It will affect all of humanity. It's happening right now. And that's a promise. And it's very, very good, ultimately, because this is the time when mankind is really focusing on the honor of God, which is the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Stay with us. Temple Talk. We'll be right back.
Shall move back. Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. Today, the 11th day of the month of Mar Cheshvan, 5775, 4th day of November, 2014. Today, the 11th day, of course, the yahrzeit, the anniversary of the death of Rachel Imenu, our matriarch Rachel, who, as the prophet Jeremiah tells us, is crying without comfort for her children to return to the land. And as you pointed out, Rabbi, the land is the land of Moriah, and that is the Holy Temple. That is the place of the Holy Temple, and that's where we're returning to. And yes, Rachel Imenu will be crying until we're back up there, and until this mythical status quo is eradicated. And why I call it mythical, Rabbi, is that over the past year or so, a tremendous amount of research was actually done in governmental Knesset parliamentarian records here in Israel. And it turns out that there really never was a status quo. There really never was an order by the government for Jews not to pray in the Temple Mount. There were certain temporary, let's call them restraining orders for specific situations at most, and then they were sort of, used over and over. It's like using the same, I don't know what, over and over and over again. Excuse. And before long, you had this myth of a status quo that, as we say, how do we say here in Hebrew, lo haya v'lo nivra?
There never was such a thing.
It never was.
Right.
It never existed. And now it exists in mythology, and people always refer to it. The world refers to it.
In fact, in terms of research and archival level of understanding, you know that shortly after the successful liberation of Jerusalem, the unification of the city, the miraculous Six-Day War in 1967, the government of Israel was, at least in some ministries and in some committees, we're drawing up plans for a synagogue on the Temple Mount. Mm-hmm. And again, and I've been trying to clarify this to world media, because, like their whole thing is like, well, what do you expect from the Muslims? Of course they're going to try to kill you because you're this and that. You're talking about this. It's so confrontational, and that's so absurd because, first of all, when we campaign for the right to pray on the Temple Mount, it's for all people. It's not only for the Jewish people. And I keep saying to them over and over again, because they keep saying, you're talking about civil rights. You're talking about that you're only advocating for peaceful prayer, but you really want to build the temple. So first of all, I keep saying, actually, right now, I am indeed talking about that we want to be able to move our lips. And is that really something that you think is incitement to killing someone? And do you think that that is really so outrageous? And do you think that that is really so unfair? Do you think that we don't deserve to be able to move our lips? Do you think that...
May I add something, Rabbi? If we start to determine what thoughts are behind people's prayers, then we're gonna have to have thought police, and that's the exact opposite of freedom.
You're going too deep. The fact is, it should be considered a very basic, if not the most basic, decent right of a person to be able to express his religious feeling, his belief, his desire to pray from his heart, the burden that we all have, whether it's for ourselves, for our loved ones, for the future, for the world. You can't get more pure than that. The mix begins to get murkier and more interesting and more also insidious when we understand the fact that it's no secret, we've been broadcasting it for years, it's online. The fact is that what we call the syndrome of Muslim temple denial is a rather new phenomena. In other words, we have these publications from the Muslim Waqf, the same Waqf that torment and browbeat and follow and monitor us on the Temple Mount today. The same Waqf, the same Jordanian-based religious authority that was given over by Israel the day-to-day administrative privilege on the Temple Mount. The same body published booklets in the English language prior to the establishment of the State of Israel, of which we are holding in our hands the original copies, in which they say that this site of the Temple Mount, which is, by the way, why it's called the Temple Mount, is universally acknowledged as the site of Solomon's Temple, and that is beyond dispute. Those are the expressions, universally acknowledged and beyond dispute. Those are the expressions used by the Islamic Waqf about the Temple Mount's relationship to the Holy Temple of Jewish history. And after the establishment of the State of Israel, not after 1967, but after 1948, those booklets were reprinted with complete revisionist history, all expunged, all taken out, instead saying that the site has been associated with Islam from the very beginning of time. Of course, Judaism predated Islam by over 1,000 years, but that's a different issue. But the point is, this whole status quo thing, you and I, Yitzchak, on this program and in other media outlets over the years have been reporting faithfully about what goes on the Temple Mount, the videos that we create, about the confrontation, about how it's gotten worse in the past few years because of the funneling of funds through Hamas, how there are Hamas and even ISIS cells on the Temple Mount, how the police are powerless. And for so long I've been blaming the police. I've been angry at the police. We've been talking about how they're so duplicit and complicit and how they're part of the problem and how... I think that we've become more seasoned and intellectually mature over the years, and we begin to understand the police have nothing to do with anything. In fact, I bet you that they feel horrible about the fact that they really are powerless. They probably would love to be able to do something, but they are instructed not to. And they're not the issue at all, unfortunately, to use that expression that's so horrible, like status quo. They're following orders. But the fact is that what unravels and what becomes clearer and clearer with every news headline is that Israel has a very bizarre and very kinky relationship with Jordan. And that Israel feels, apparently, and again, I'm not the prime minister, we're not politicians, I'm not going to judge the call of things that would be very presumptuous for me to assume that I understand. But what we can understand, as much as any learned layman can understand, is that Israel is in a position that it really, really needs Jordan to be stable and to act as a buffer to what's between Jordan and Israel, what's beyond Jordan's borders. And so it's in Israel's interest to make Jordan very, very happy. And thus, we prop up this worthless puppet of a regime that doesn't really exist historically, and that literally exists through
They're part of the status quo.
Through Israel's good graces.
It's part of the myth.
It's part of the myth because he doesn't even have a legal claim to the leadership of the country, and the fact is that Jordan considers itself to be historically the religious custodian of Jerusalem's holy sites, and therefore, says Netanyahu, I'm going to keep that in place.
Right,
and so look at this absurd headline from this week that Bibi says, after the whole onslaught of an unnamed administration official in the Obama administration who called Bibi something, right? And it was really not nice, right? Chicken asterisk exclamation mark da 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 da. And the intention of them in that extremely invasive derogatory statement about my prime minister, which I find very offensive personally, because it's one thing for us to say something which we first of all, we would never say that. Second of all, it's one thing for us to criticize, but the Obama administration just is gunning for Netanyahu and for all of Israel in no less a manner than was the terrorist gunning for Yehuda Glick, or as we all appear now on this same list, because the Obama administration is seeking to make long-term permanent changes in America's relationship with Israel. And the fact that the State Department, reluctantly, begrudgingly condemned the shooting of an American citizen, but yet in the same breath from the other side of its mouth said, but we're not in favor of Jewish prayer on the Temple Mount. Why? I thought, what about Rosa Parks? I thought America stands for dignity and freedom. It is, by the way, our country, and we have like a 5,000-year-old history here. This is the week of Parshat Vayera, right? But that's a different story. But in other words, America, that's supposed to stand for all the things that Superman stood for, truth, justice, and the American way. And that always meant, equality and freedom. It just doesn't, those words are all so lovely, equality, freedom, democracy, but it just doesn't apply to Jews, especially Jews in Jerusalem. Of course, this is a big court case this week. Can Jerusalem even be recognized as the capital of Israel in someone's passport?
Not even as a capital of Israel, simply as being a geographical fact. That it exists.
So this unnamed administration official had this word to say about Netanyahu, meaning that he's a coward. Why? Because he's not willing to risk it all. He's not willing to give Israel away. He's not willing to dismantle. So they find him to be intransigent in terms of their trying to foist and implement their horrible peace plans on us. And by the way, Kerry has a new one now, which he's not gonna let us know what it is exactly. But the fact is, I also have some critical things to say about the Prime Minister, because here's this absurd headline that we read in these days following the assassination attempt, right? He says, because it's so heating up, because everyone is all eyes are turned towards the Temple Mount. So he says, listen, the Temple Mount is the holiest place for the Jewish people. This is a beautiful headline, right? Bibi says, but I won't allow Jewish prayer there. Yes, you heard that correctly. He says, make no mistake, Abbas and all of you people, Abdallah, this is our place, but we won't be praying there. What is that? A more romanticization of nostalgia, like that you'll have something to look forward to? More self-martyrdom, like we'll just do without that and we'll give it to you? What is that exactly? No, it's the status quo. It's the status quo. You know what? He issued a statement the other day calling on members of Knesset and other people that are vocal and active about the Temple Mount. He called on them to exercise responsibility, to speak responsibly. And what he really meant by that was stop talking about the Temple Mount, stop talking about Jewish rights to prayer there, stop talking about it because it's not responsible. What does he expect us all to just go away? You know, there's another headline that he had a secret meeting this past Shabbat in Qatar with.
I don't think it was in Qatar.
Oh, it was the story that I'm about to say was reported in Qatar newspaper. I'm sorry, Qatar newspaper. He met with Abdallah
from Bahrain, I think.
And he met about the situation on the Temple Mount, and he calmed him down and said, "Don't worry, there won't be Jewish prayer on the Temple Mount." And the rumor that was published in a Qatari or a Bahraini newspaper is that he told Abdallah, I don't know if it's true or not, he promised Abdallah that soon he will not allow Jews to pray on the Temple Mount. I sure hope that isn't true. But one of the funny things was that when they were reporting the story, like there was this banner headline that Netanyahu says we have a status quo and we will keep it and we're proud of it and nobody will change that. And then it went on to laud. The report went on to laud the status quo as if it was like a huge accomplishment, so that if you don't really know what it's talking about, you're reading, you'll say, wow, Israel is like so great. And then it explained, this were Netanyahu's words. He says, we have a status quo for Christians, Jews, and Muslims on the Temple Mount.
Worship arrangements.
Worship arrangements. But the worship arrangements are that Muslims can worship there and no one else can. And that's being treated like, wow, starry-eyed, like, wow, what a bastion of democracy and freedom. We have a status quo. And this is what we call the sordid and unseemly tale of the status quo.
The tragic thing, Rabbi, is that if our prime minister would announce to the world that we are going to respect human rights, respect our own law, and respect even our own agreement with Jordan, and the peace agreement between Israel and Jordan from 1994, which Article 9 guarantees freedom of worship for all monotheistic faiths on the Temple Mount.
It's hysterical.
If he would just stand up and say, we're honoring all that, he would put out the fire. He'd gain the respect of all the nations, because when you stand for what's yours, people respect you. They may not like it. It may take them a little bit of time to get used to it, but they stop. You know the story about the bully. When you stand up to the bully backs off. And as long as we keep hiding behind this myth of a status quo, which is a dagger in our heart, the bully will be coming after us over and over again. When Avraham Avinu, to get back to the Parsha, went up to Har Moriah, the Mount of Moriah, in the land of Moriah, in this week's Parsha, he went up with his son, he went up with a bundle of sticks, he went up with some fire, and he went up with a knife. Aside from himself and his son, he couldn't bring any of those things up to the Temple Mount now. Fortunately for him, there was no security arrangements at the time that prevented him from doing what God had commanded him to do. But he established that day the only status quo that really is relevant to the Temple Mount, and that is, this is the place where God is seen, and this is the place where God sees. And that's why, as you say all the time, Rabbi, that's why we go up, because we want to be seen there by God. That's the status quo. This is the place where God has, as we say in Hebrew, kesher ayin, eye contact, direct. There's nothing in between, nothing separating us from God on the Temple Mount. That's the status quo. That's the only status quo that is worth referring to and worth fighting for and worth standing up for.
And thanks for reminding me to mention that when we talk about the myth of the status quo, how absurd. I mean, this whole thing is like you're standing on your head, because this is like the biggest joke. It's like, I don't know how to describe how comical these terms are. And this is this farce of democracy. Thank you for reminding me that Article 9 of the 1994 peace treaty between Israel and Jordan calls for the freedom of all monotheistic faiths to be able to worship at the Temple Mount. And so Netanyahu says, we're going to respect our peace treaty with Jordan. We're going to respect the status quo. The peace treaty with Jordan calls for us to be able to pray at the Temple Mount. So I get it. If you're advocating for this, if you're a Jew who stands up for what he believes, if you speak your mind and want to be able to be seen in the place that God chose, that we're commanded to go to, where we're actually commanded to pray, the cradle, the anchor of our very history and civilization, and the actual place in which the redemption of mankind is dependent upon. If you're a Jew and you believe those things, I get it, you're going to get shot. Because that is, as we have maintained consistently, what Islam is all about. And I can't believe that I'm holding this paper that says on the bottom of it, we, the Muslims, will not, it says in Hebrew, they had the courtesy of writing in Hebrew, we, the Muslims, will not allow any person to touch Al-Aqsa, which, by the way, I'm not interested in doing at this point. Your deeds will cause this region to be plunged into war. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is for Muslims only, and we will not allow you to control it. And then you have these pictures with our names written in Arabic, and it's all over the internet, and that is just like absolutely amazing. So first of all, it's like a great compliment and honor. Second of all, it's a total revelation of what this is really all about. If you are speaking about the Temple Mount, if you are advocating for peaceful prayer, if you talk about Jewish values, if you talk about the Beit HaMikdash, then you deserve to be killed. That's what it's all about. And we keep on saying that it's coming to a theater near you. It's definitely in our theater already, and we're all in the front row. And the police went on record as saying that there was no recorded threat against Yehuda, and that's been since that theory has been thrashed quite openly here in the media, where it's been proven time and again that the police did know about this. And so a number of us that were included in this, we went to the police to officially lodge a complaint of a threat against our lives, so that at least it should be on record. Not that we expect them to do anything about it. But it's all game. It's all total sham and hypocrisy. And this is either you stand up for what you believe in, or you don't. And what meaning does anything have if we don't? And we've been trying to, to explain this for so long. The Holy Temple and the Temple Mount and prayer on the Temple Mount is no different than keeping Shabbat, eating matzah on Passover. It is the Jewish experience. It is not extremist to want to be able to pray peacefully on the Temple Mount and to cherish the vision of the Holy Temple as being the secret of the unity of all mankind. And like we keep on saying, that's what this is really all about. And instead of labeling someone an extremist because they cherish the vision of the prophet Isaiah and the Torah's commandment of building the Holy Temple, and they cherish the idea of being able to pray on the Temple Mount, so get it out of the lexicon of saying that it's an extremist position, and admit and realize, actually, this is mainstream Judaism. It's as embarrassing as it might be to you, the Jewish people have been praying these very words for 3 times a day for 2,000 years, that the Holy Temple should be rebuilt. This is really what it's all about. So what exactly were you expecting? What exactly did you think? So what, should we back down? Should we be surprised that this is happening?
Not merely the expression extremist, but also it's, we're all rightists because we're fighting for human rights. We're right-wing activists, but we're really human rights activists that are fighting for basic rights of every person to be able to pray in a place that's holy to them.
In the meantime, the irons are all in the fire. Jerusalem is the cup of trembling, as it were. We want to build houses for Jewish people, for Jewish children in Jerusalem. And that's condemned by the United States. The United States has made its choice, and it's so clear.
Declared it's hunting season. It's open season on the Jewish state. Obama's his expressions, his administration's expressions and policies have made it quite clear that they have cut the ties.
How dare we? No wonder they call Bibi a chicken, you know what? How dare we go against America? Should I repeat that the State Department statement about Israel's approval of 500 homes in Jerusalem? It would be unfortunate. That sounds like Don Corleone talking. It would be unfortunate if, after the unequivocal and the unanimous opposition of the United States and international community, Israeli authorities would actively seek to move this plan forward. In other words, we warned you. We warned you.
In reality, there's a lot to be said for Israel cutting the apron strings that bind us to American policy, which has numerous times over the decades has really tied our hands and prevented us from moving forward toward greater independence and toward the realization of our goals here in the land. So this is.
And we're all a liability to them. The baby Chaya Zissel gets mowed down by a terrorist. CNN reports it as a hit-and-run accident when a car goes into a crowd of Jews. An American is an assassination attempt. It's all very inconvenient for America. They really don't want to admit that. They really don't even care.
So, thanks for being with us on this very bright and uplifting Temple Talk. Let's close with some positive words. There's a God in the world, and everything's going to work out. Everything's going to work out, and this is part of the plan. And just, hang on tight.
Like we always say, stay with us. Stay with us for Temple Talk.
Stay with us, Temple Talk.